Yeah. Good morning and welcome to Wholistic Health Alliance's monthly community talks. Today we have Lisa Marchese. She'll be talking to us about a wonderful and much needed topic where we have very less awareness. And in a minute, I'm going to pass on the platform to Lisa to introduce herself and get started with the talk. But I'll just take a minute to quickly introduce the organization, the platform. Wholistic Health Alliance is a national 501c3 nonprofit. Our tagline says building healthy communities, and that is what we are dedicated to and committed to. We try to bring in as many holistic practitioners as we can to the platform so that they also get better awareness, better visibility, and the community also knows who is out there, what are they offering, how does it work, where are they offering it out of, so that they have options. Because that's what we want to do. We want to raise the awareness in the community that in addition to the pills, or besides the pills or some strong interventions, there are many other ways to resolve health issues and come into balance. And when we use holistic ways, the state of balance and harmony is usually long lasting, and it stays, and the methods are very, very congenial to the body and the mind. So we really want to propagate as much awareness as possible about the holistic ways of healing and wellness. And I would just quickly share one of our practitioner invitation, flyers. So if you're watching this later on, and this is why we record, so that all of the information that Lisa is going to give us today is accessible and helpful to anybody who's watching later on. So if you are watching this from anywhere and you practice any holistic modality, consider joining us. And even if you are not trained in a holistic method, if you're just a supporter, you can just join us as an ally. That option is also there, and the joining fee is super nominal. And we also have a youth brigade initiative and a couple projects under that. So if you are watching this and have a youth, do go to our website, www.holistichealthalliance.org. The holistic starts with a W, and there's a story for the W on the website, which you can read. So again, the website is www.holistichealthalliance.org. Please check it out and join us. If not in any specific way, you can even join us as a volunteer. And if you have a youth, do check out our Youth Brigade initiative. And with that, I'm going to pass on to Lisa to introduce herself and get started with the talk.
All right. Thanks, Doctor. All right, so my name is Lisa. I've been a physical therapist now for 14 years. I've treated across actually many states. I've treated across many settings. I've treated pediatrics, 3-month-old babies, all the way to geriatrics and actually grief work with them with end of life. So in everything that I've seen, I've never found a case where it wasn't the most beneficial for that patient or client to be treated holistically, right? You have a young kid who breaks a leg playing football. Well, they might be a little depressed because they're not with their friends playing football anymore, right? We have someone who's elderly. They might have just depression, and then their mobility goes down because they're just not wanting to get out of bed in the morning to move around, right? So I really wanted to today kind of demystify that process. Let's look at why this is scientifically backed, and let's look at how these things are connected. And I should also say that this sort of endeavor led me to want to go for more education. So I'm actually about to graduate with a master's in counseling so that I can look at the mental health side of things and eventually start to blend everything together in a very holistic way to treat the body and the mind and the whole person, right? Their social connections. The more we treat everything, the more we'll move towards wellness. So welcome to my presentation. Feel free to ask questions at any time. I'm not a super formal presenter, so I always say, just shout out if you have anything to say or any questions. Let me start to share my presentation. All right, so welcome, where the brain meets the body, demystifying the brain body, or demystifying the mind body connection. Okay. And so I already introduced myself and told you a little bit about how I ended up here. I should also say I'm a proud mom, right? So I'm very realistic about the concerns everyone has in this day and age between working, being a mom, having a career. And I'm also an aspiring guitarist because we all need a little balance in life, right? And that's my having fun thing that I do. I can't say you want me to play on Zoom anytime soon, but I'm working on it. So, all right. So I've organized this presentation into 4 main sections to try to make it as easy to follow as possible. Firstly, we're going to look at the neurological connections that connect our brain and our body. It's mostly through what we call the autonomic nervous system. And really, we're going to build on that by looking at the mind-gut connection. There's actually feedback loops, meaning information goes in a circle between your brain and your intestines, basically. So food absorption, mood, and energy are all highly, highly related. And then after we take our stop there, we're going to go to the 3rd section on hormones. So we want to understand hormones are the messengers of the body. So we want to really understand what are the messages that are being sent between the mind and the body. And then fourthly, I'm going to kind of sum up some recommendations from the research about things we can do to support our mind and body, lifestyle, diet, mental health, things like that. All right. So let's dive in. Neurological connections. So in a nutshell, your brain makes all the decisions, right? Do we think so? Do we not? Well, let's find out. The answer is not exactly. So the way this works is that our autonomic nervous system, which is simply a set of nerves, it filters information from your senses before it gets to your brain. So everything that you see, everything that you hear, everything you feel or taste, it's all getting filtered through one of 2 sections of this nervous system. Information is processed and stored in the brain according to which filter is used, and that becomes very important down the road. And it places information into 2 general categories. The first one, I'm going to use some rose-colored glasses here to represent, and it means like what I'm perceiving, what I'm feeling is safe and relaxing. Now, the other side of things, which we also need to promote balance, is when things are risky and dangerous. So I'm going to use some Darth Vader-like glasses here to represent this risky, dangerous filtering. You know, it filters information as being risky or dangerous in some way. And so this is not exactly our most advanced part of our brains, right? We have a part of our brain that makes the decisions and that can problem solve and do math. This is a system that goes way back to caveman times, because in caveman times, we really needed to be able to tell, is something safe or is it risky? So I think looking at a scenario will help us better differentiate this and see how that applies to us today. So here's my story about a caveman. So on the left here, everything is going well. They're cooking some dinner over a fire. This guy's resting. This one's yawning, right? Everything that they see, hear, feel, taste, and smell is being filtered by their autonomic nervous system. And it's specifically being filtered by their parasympathetic nervous system, right? Fancy word for these rose-colored glasses. Everything's safe. It tells our brain, hey, everything's cool, we can relax, right? When this system gets activated, we have a different cascade of events that happen throughout the body that affect our organs, affect our intestines. It really affects everything. Now, let's take the scenario on the right. Let's say, you know, everything is cool. They're eating their dinner. Then all of a sudden a jaguar shows up, right? This guy's still yawning. There's a jaguar behind him. So then this other man here is like, I need to either run or I need to like fight him with a stick, right? Or a stone tied to a stick. So in this scenario, they're seeing, hearing, feeling, and tasting, right? And I'm assuming this guy yawning is going to turn around and have the same reaction eventually. It's going to get filtered through their sympathetic nervous system, right? Those Darth Vader glasses are going to kick in and they're going to say, okay, a different cascade of events is going to happen that helps them better respond to the threat. And so I just put, if it was me, I would say we should probably run. Maybe this guy's like, I should probably tie a rock to a stick. Same idea, fight or flight. So let's delve into a little more about what happens when we activate either the Darth Vader system or the rose-colored glasses system. So when the tiger is about to strike, right, it activates what we call the fight or flight response. In our bodies, this will do things like elevating our heart rate, elevating our blood pressure, respiratory rate, body temperature. Blood is going to flow away from our organs and into our muscles because our body, it's preparing our body to fight or to run more effectively than it would if we were relaxing, right? When I say that catecholamines are released in the blood, we're really talking about a group of hormones called like adrenaline, epinephrine, norepinephrine. And basically all of these hormones that get released into the blood are going to cause a decrease in activation of the immune system, right? So any of those lymphocytes that are going to be fighting bacteria go away. It causes a decrease in cognitive functioning. So when we use this kind of archaic caveman system, it actually takes some functioning away from the top part of our brain that does problem solving. Not that it won't return when we are out of danger, right? But just saying it will sort of divert our attention elsewhere. It also causes a decrease in working memory. And so here's the kicker. You're probably thinking like, okay, that's nice. We don't have tigers running around. Well, this is true. However, today we have something that I call chronic stress, or that we call chronic stress. And so what it means is that this same system is being activated when we have a job that's stressful, right? Anytime we're under a deadline, right? With pressure for a deadline, anytime that we're having conflicts with other coworkers or maybe with different things that have to do with work that are stressful. So basically, the more stress you have, the more you're activating this sympathetic nervous system. So let's look at the flip side of things and how we decrease this response. So the parasympathetic nervous system, right, or these rose-colored glasses, this is responsible for dialing down that fight or flight response to maintain a balance. Because if we ran on that adrenaline all the time, if we always had an elevated heart rate and blood pressure, I think we all know it leads to heart problems, right? It'll lead to panic attacks. It will lead to generally feeling stressed out and tired in life, right? So we need this other system to balance ourselves and spend some time in that rest and relaxation state. So this part of the nervous system is responsible for dialing down that fight or flight response. And it's also responsible for rest and digestion. So it's going to do the exact opposite of the first system. It's going to lower heart rate, lower blood pressure, respiratory rate, body temperature. It'll actually increase the blood flow back to your organs so that you can digest food. You can make all the good hormones that help in regulating the body, all that kind of stuff. You also need the system to sleep well. So if you're really heightened from stress, your body's going to have a hard time coming back down and you're not going to sleep very well. And it's important to sleep well because that's when we consolidate memories, or it really helps our memory to sleep well. It helps with emotional control. They've shown that when you lack sleep, you lack the ability to sort of modulate how you feel. And then it also helps in problem solving abilities, excuse me. So overall, we do need both systems. And I don't want to make it sound like the sympathetic nervous system is somehow bad. We do need to have it activated somewhat to be in an alert state and to get work done and to focus. But we sometimes underestimate the balance that has to occur. We do need some time, some downtime, some relaxation time to keep everything in balance so that we can work on both sides of the coin. So the conclusions we can draw from the research here is that controlling stress is key. It's a key influencer in our ability to learn, our ability to remember things, and our immune function. So we can actually give ourselves instances of fight or flight stress, like if you like horror movies, and I don't mean to pick on horror movies, I mean, if you like them, that's great, but something to think about that just like, what we feed our bodies, you are what you eat, you are your sensory input. So we also are what we watch and we are what we hear, right? And if what we're seeing or hearing is stressful, if we're constantly in loud environments that make us jump, or watching horror movies that we feel super like our hearts racing for the main character to like not go up the stairs and run out the door, that kind of thing, that can cause an increase in that sympathetic activity. Adults need 8 to 9 hours of sleep a night to function optimally. And so getting enough sleep is also key to regulating this nervous system. And then giving yourself time for rest and relaxation. So basically, one of the main ways in mental health that we look at controlling stress is to give ourselves what we call self-care time, right? And so when we think about self-care, we want to ask the question, how do you recharge your battery? When you're feeling stressed out, when you're feeling tired, what do you do to relax? Is it playing the guitar? Because I'm with you there, right? Is it going out with friends and having a nice dinner, right? Is it reading a book? Whatever that is, that's helping you regulate your nervous system. Anything that you're doing to take care of yourself and to make yourself feel recharged and feel a little more relaxed and better is actually really good for your memory, for your cognitive function, and for your immune cells too. All right. So moving on to the next section, this is the brain-gut connection. And in a nutshell here, we are what we eat because it influences how we feel, quite literally. What we eat can really make us feel a certain way. Good example of this, did you ever give a toddler sugar, right? Well, they feel super energetic, right? And they're bouncing off the walls. Same idea. It might have some different consequences in adults, but how we eat definitely influences our moods and how we feel, but also how we feel changes our digestion. So let's delve into looking at this a little bit closer. All right, so this is kind of I want to say within the last, I'm going to be broad here, 10 to 20 years, they've started research on this brain-gut connection. And so because it's new, there's not one name for it. You might come across it as the gut-brain axis. The GBA is a common one. Sometimes they'll call the intestines the second brain. And sometimes they call the brain and intestines together the emotional motor system, implying that, as your body's moving and working, there's some emotions involved, which I know surprises a lot of people. So intestines relay information to and from the brain through three main connections, right? The first is something called cytokines. It's an immune-related cell, right? So an immune response can happen in your gut, and your brain actually will have some consequences from that. Neuroendocrine cells, it's actually a really fancy term for hormones. So when we talk about neuroendocrine, we're talking about a little bit of that, the two nervous systems I just told you about, and we're talking a little bit about hormones relaying information that has to do with the nutritional content of what we're eating. It has to do with the vitamins, the minerals, the proteins. And then there's also a nerve that goes directly into your brain that's connected to like so many organs, and it's your vagus nerve. So there's also a pathway from your intestines to your vagus, through your vagus nerve from your intestines to your brain that relays information. So let's take a closer look at kind of the story of how that happens. We're going to start our story in the intestines. All right. So don't be too intimidated by this picture. We're going to explain it actually from the bottom up. So you can see all these little sprinkle looking things here. This is inside the intestine, right? And that's what we call microbiome or good bacteria, right? Then the next layer up we have is actually the lining of your intestines that either allows things to pass through or keeps them in the intestines to be secreted as waste. And then we have this whole top half just kind of represents the rest of the body, right? We don't want to make it too complicated. We're just going to call that everything else in the body. So our story starts down here. What we eat produces different kinds of bacteria. I'm sure you've heard of probiotics, right? Those are really good bacteria. That helps us break down the nutrition in our food so that it can be absorbed through this wall more easily. So microbiome or good bacteria in the gut is produced based on what we eat. This good bacteria allows the digestion of nutrients that are necessary in neurotransmitter production in the brain, right? So what will happen is through one of these three methods, either the immune cells, through metabolites like that sort of hormone and neural pathways, or through the vagus nerve, it's going to be this biome is breaking down nutrients that will be carried to the brain to make neurotransmitters. Reduced levels of good bacteria can actually add to inflammation in the gut and the brain. You wouldn't think that, right? So what can happen is with these immune cells over here, let's say that we eat a ton of sugar, right? Or let's say let's say someone's allergic to eggs and they eat an egg, right? What can happen is there's such an immune response. These cytokines can kind of go nuts and say, oh my gosh, there's something really wrong here, and it'll start to make this intestine inflamed, right? Things start to get through it that shouldn't normally get through it. And it can cause things like IBS. They know now that IBS is or I should say there's a good amount of research to say that IBS is caused by an imbalance in the microbiome of the intestines. So having foods like sugar can add to that intestinal irritation, or eating things you're allergic to add to irritation, right? And it can actually bring that inflammation all the way up to the brain, where you might not produce the same neurotransmitters, so you might feel some anxiety, right? Or you may not feel you're able to calm yourself as well. You might feel tired all the time. It has a lot to do with our energy levels too, or how we're doing producing neurotransmitters can really produce whether we feel energetic or not. So when we look at the other half of the story, right, the brain connection piece, good bacteria allows the brain to produce enzymes that aid in the production of serotonin, which is a mood elevator, GABA, which is an anxiety reducer, neurotrophic factor that works in memory, dopamine, which is a huge one, lots of research out there on dopamine for mood elevators, and then melatonin, right, which cues us for sleep. So if we need good solid nutrition to produce all of these neurotransmitters, why do we not look at our diets more, right? So we're going to do that a little later in the presentation. Studies show even that probiotics also reduce the release of cortisol and other stress hormones. So again, those hormones, those stressors can't act on the brain to, make us feel more stressed out. If we're eating the right amount of, if we're adding to our good bacteria, it's going to help produce the hormones for rest and digestion as well. That will just help us feel better and help elevate our mood, and help with memory and all of those kinds of things. So brain physiology on the other side of things, right? We've talked a lot about how the gut influences your mood. And then to talk just a little bit about how your mood and your brain influence your gut, we could say that your brain physiology, or what you're feeling, what you're producing up here, is going to alter how food moves through your intestines, right? We call that gastric motility. It's going to alter how fast or slow it moves through, right? So I don't know if anyone's had this experience of having like a stomach ache before a big presentation, right? That can be, it can be because you're altering your gut with your anxiety, right? It alters intestinal permeability. So it might mean that less things get through. You're not digesting your food. You might get like some loose motions, right? And then acid production. A lot of people have issues with acid that really are brought on by stress. And so what's happening is what's up here is actually telling your stomach down here to produce more acid. So things that we can conclude about diet for our mood are that eating foods high in nutrients like leafy green fermented food helps to support the biome. There's so many ways we can divide it. It comes down to fruits and vegetables. And then the fermented foods piece is literally putting in that good bacteria. Now, I should say it isn't entirely possible to ingest through fermented foods or through probiotics all of the bacteria we need in our gut. We definitely have to fuel it with good fuel to produce all of the bacteria that we need for digestion. But in general, we can divide it into leafy greens. We can divide it into other colored vegetables. We can divide it into vegetables, like the cruciate vegetables, like we can say like broccoli and cauliflower and eggplant as a group. And then we can say the other fruits and vegetables could be another group. So you can divide it. There's different schools of thought on exactly what the best types of fruits and vegetables and the best way to pair things are. But basically, if you can eat a good, healthy diet and get all the nutrients that you need, you should produce the neurotransmitters in your brain optimally that it would really help your mental health, right? And I think also on the other side of things, well, actually, I'll get into that in the next slide about mental health and affecting your digestion. So one other thing to note is this idea of eating enough protein. I would say that it's a little bit underestimated, and we really do need amino acids to make neurotransmitters. So amino acids are really just the building blocks of protein. You could break a protein down into like 2, 3, 9 amino acids. Not all sources of protein have the 9 essential amino acids that we need to function normally. And we'll get into that a little bit more later on in the presentation. Another supportive conclusion about diet for mood would be that if we have food intolerances, they can also add to intestinal discomfort or inflammation in the body. So if you're allergic to milk, then definitely don't drink milk because that will add even to some anxiety and potential mood issues. Something that's probably less talked about, but we really should spread awareness on, is that we can actually do a lot to change our mood that would actually help our digestion. So giving yourself adequate time to digest is definitely true. If we charge into the next thing, or if we, you've heard that old adage not to go swimming after you eat, that's absolutely true. If you want your body to be in that rest and digestion mode, this is where it builds on the previous slides of the neurology, right? If we want to remain in rest and digestion, we shouldn't activate our sympathetic system by doing something really stressful after we eat. And again, everything is subject to what is reasonable with your schedule, but as much as possible, if you could even take 5-10 minutes after you eat to do something that's not stressful, it will help you digest your food better. Keeping stress levels in check to keep everything moving smoothly is also key. And so what we think about here is these instances of, for example, being stuck in traffic. And if you let that get to you, you feel angry, you feel stressed out, and you're huffing. Well, we have a lot of emotional regulation techniques we can use, a lot of mindfulness techniques we can use to sort of bring that anger level down, right? To just bring some awareness between that stimulus of the traffic and that response of the extreme stress up here, and you're huffing and puffing. And so if we regulate our mood, it's going to help us better regulate our digestion, right? When we regulate our mood, this is jumping ahead a little, but it releases less cortisol. So it will help us not to hold so much body fat too, if we're not getting angry and upset so much, right? I'll get to that in a little bit. I'm sort of jumping ahead. All right. So to start at the beginning of the story with hormones, I want to stress that we don't want to blame the messengers. They're only doing their job. So it's so funny. Everybody thinks, that it must be the cortisol. It's the fault of the hormone. And that's why I have these issues, right? Or that's why I'm having hot flashes. A lot of times it isn't really the hormones. It's that they're being released in response to something else. So let's take a closer look at what the hormones really are, what they do, what they really mean, right? I think it's one of these things we hear that term thrown around. We don't ever get a lot of concrete information on what their jobs are. All right. So I'm going to call them types of messengers because they really are messengers in the body, right? And now this is not an all-inclusive list because that would take up more space than I have on the slide. But in general, we can say we have sex hormones that work in reproduction and in development from child to adulthood, right? And through our lifespan, really. And those are things like estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. Now, I will never blame anybody for not wanting hot flash because their estrogen is dipping. But again, it's not really estrogen's fault. It's the fact that as we get older and go into menopause, that, you know, the hot flashes happen because we're aging, unfortunately. I'm sorry, that's a hard truth to throw at you, but it's true. The other area we can sort of group hormones into is growth and metabolism. So there's been a lot of news recently about this GLP-1 because they're able to give that for weight loss, but it's not necessarily safe. You can see opinions on both sides of things. It's still very, very new. But basically, all of these things, human growth hormone, insulin, leptin, estrogen, all of these are going to work in terms of metabolism and energy, and in terms of digesting, in terms of the blood sugars and how energy gets moved around the body through blood sugar. Where our main story is today for the mind-body connection is really this stress hormones. Probably we could make an argument for why the sex hormones and growth and metabolism hormones also are mind-body related. But for today, let's stick with this kind of main story here of the epinephrine, the adrenaline, norepinephrine, right? Those are the three ones we call catecholamines for short. I know, not really short, but kind of. And then cortisol and ACTH are also stress hormones. So let's take a closer look. And I'm going to walk you through what happens in our body, because the more we understand about why they get released, the more we can work on the factors to sort of control the consequences that we don't really want to have. So we do need some stress in order to function, right? I think if we didn't get out of bed every day, or we didn't have something in our life to worry about, we probably would be really feeling empty, right? So we do need some stress. But that being said, most people, I think, are in the situation of having more stress or chronic stress than what they need. So let's say that stress happens up here, right? What we know from research today is that before any hormones even get released, there's a cardiac response. They actually call this cardiac sympathetic control in the research, right? So in other words, control, meaning that this is a really important, crucial step we can use to control what happens, right? But in general, stress happens, right? The cardiac response is that our heart rate goes up, our respiratory rate goes up, the blood pressure goes up, our output from the heart goes up. And so in this first scenario, right, which happens more with the fight or flight response, but can obviously happen with chronic stress too, there's one group of hormones that we're going to abbreviate just by the glands they come from, SAM, we'll call it SAM for short, right? So Q group 1, right, our heart rate goes up, Q group 1 hormones, epinephrine, norepinephrine, and adrenaline get released. Well, immediately, it tells the immune cells to stop or to not focus so much on pairing with the bad bacteria to get rid of it, right? It kind of decreases the production of those immune cells and decreases their functioning, right? These hormones also are going to take away from our digestion, right? So things that maybe we should be absorbing, we may not absorb as much of, and that can be a problem as well. And it's also going to change our cognition and our mood. It's not that it makes us aggressive per se, but it's harder to have a good mood, or it's harder to produce those neurotransmitters that we need to feel good and to not feel anxious when we have a lot of this epinephrine, norepinephrine floating around, right? On the other side of things, so let's say it's chronic stress, right? We still have that cardiac response that happens, but when it's kind of chronic low-grade stress, we cue messenger group 2, or the HPA axis. And again, just named for the glands and places that it comes from. This is cortisol, ACTH, and corticotropin. So these hormones here have a very similar function to what the hormones in the SAM group have, except picture this happening in the background all the time, the whole workday, right? All the whole time you're awake. If you're stressed out, it's just nibbling away a little bit at your immune function. So you're going to get sick easier. It's nibbling a little bit away at your digestive function. So you might be getting some like inflammation in there and you might not be absorbing stuff the same way. And then it's also going to make you a little bit cranky, right? I don't know anybody that's chronically stressed out or with a high stress job that isn't a little bit cranky sometimes, right? Or feeling a little down or anxious sometimes, right? So what's really important about this is we have two places here, though, that we can influence this whole cascade of events, right? So it's funny, I know our medications might be aimed more at digestive function or at mood, but we can do a lot just on our own to modify our stress and to modify our cardiac response to stress. So let's take a look at what I mean by that a little bit closer. So supportive conclusions that come from research about hormones on mood. Exercise and movement alter hormone release, right? They actually alter how we perceive stress in the first place. They also alter or improve our cardiac ability to respond to stress, right? So if you are doing cardio on a treadmill every day, and then someone jumps out and scares you, you're already used to getting your heart rate up that high, so it's not going to release as many hormones from that process. And this is really where the mind-body therapies come into play too. They've really shown that by mind-body therapies, I mean things like Tai Chi, yoga, meditation is a great one, any form of mindfulness or meditation that you want to try. They're really shown to alter how we respond to stress, right? That we'll be able to tolerate more stress without feeling it's stressful. And they also alter our cardiac response to stress. So it allows us to, in the face of stress, not have such a big response from our heart. So it's also going to prevent that cascade of events. And so really, you might think like, oh, well, it's hormones. How are we going to ever change it other than medicine? Well, actually, it's more under our control than we think. And if you leave here with nothing else today, just know that like our stress and our mood has so much more of an effect on our body than we think, and it's so much more under our control than we think. So that leads me then to the last part of this presentation, recommendations from the research. And in a nutshell, when we support our emotional health, we are supporting our physical well-being. And when we support our physical health, we are supporting our emotional well-being, right? So diet, exercise, sleeping enough all affect our emotional well-being. So to kind of more closely hone in on which pieces of this are mental health related, taking time for self-care to recharge is key, right? We really want to balance our stress with some relaxation. And obviously this looks different for everybody, right? What we use to recharge is different for everybody. How much time we have to recharge is different for everybody. But I would encourage you to look into it if you're not already doing something for self-care, because having that balance can help you sleep better at night, right? When you practice going from that sympathetic fight or flight response to the relaxation response. And then managing your stress using mindfulness in the moment, using emotional regulation skills, and actually planning too, maybe talking with a good friend or family member or a therapist and saying, you know what, how can I sort of like manage my stress? It has to do with managing time and maybe not putting too much expectations, or how do we manage the expectations and decide which ones are priority, right? And then also engaging in mind-body therapies can change our stress response over time. So the longer we meditate, the longer we do yoga, the better we're going to be at handling the stress in life that does come our way. When I listed those out, just like meditation, yoga, Tai Chi. I should say too, some people also find, and I'm a big proponent of this, like acupuncture or even Reiki, very helpful for things that seem hormonal or things that have to do with that balance of the gut and of your mood and of hot flashes and things like that. And while they work on other systems like chi, right, like a meridian energy system, there's lots of articles out there about how they stimulate Noki receptors or pain receptors in the body, which is probably not a very good plug for them, but I promise it, I don't find it, to be honest, painful personally, either of those things. So But yeah, because of how it stimulates the nerves, it can actually help to release different hormones and to release and to change the nervous system regulation as well. And then dietary recommendations. So again, another way to look at this fruits and vegetables concept is you can say colorful fruits and vegetables, right? So you can say eat your colors. If you have fruits and veggies of different colors, they're going to have different important vitamins and minerals that are related to creating that good bacteria in your gut that we really all need. Fermented foods help support healthy microbiome as well. Those are your pickles, your kimchis, things like that. Yogurts are a really good fermented food. And then eating all 9 essential amino acids to ensure optimal neurotransmitter production. So there's something like 27 different amino acids that make up the protein in our food, right? But really, there's only 9 of them that are just key, that we absolutely need for our muscles, our heart, and our minds, and our neurotransmitters to function. Here's where it gets tricky. So eggs, dairy, and meats will always have all 9 of those amino acids. However, does it mean that we should go nuts and eat beef every day? No, I'm not really a fan of that. I don't really eat beef, to be honest. So I will say, while they have the 9 essential amino acids, we really want to look at the overall health of the product too, right? And are you allergic to eggs? Probably if you're allergic, maybe don't eat that source of amino acids. We can also, though, on the other side of things, be really mindful of how we pair our vegetarian sources of protein. So one great example that I saw recently in a documentary was corn, like an orange squash, and black beans has all 9 amino acids. So if you get all of those in a day or in a week even, you're giving yourself a lot of really good fuel for your mood and your energy. And 2 really good sources of vegetarian amino acids, right, that will have what they call complete protein, or all 9 amino acids, are quinoa and tofu, so soy products. And quinoa has obviously been called a superfood for many reasons. It's actually also very high in fiber as well. Eating foods that are linked to inflammation, eat foods that are linked to inflammation in moderation, right? So what comes to mind for me is sugar. Unfortunately, in this day and age with processed food, we eat a lot of sugar, and that sugar can actually cause inflammation, or what they call leaky gut, which lets things pass through the intestinal wall that shouldn't, that makes you feel sick, right? And also moderation is key for things like caffeine and alcohol, because those also have an effect on your mood and on your body. I definitely like my cup of tea, so I won't say not to have caffeine at all, right? Or there's nothing wrong with liking to go out having a drink, but when we have too much of it, it will mess with our organs. It will mess actually with our production of neurotransmitters in the brain. And then lifestyle recommendations. One thing I didn't really touch upon was this idea of movement and exercise. Both of those things feed into changing how we respond to stress, and it changes our cardiac response to stress. So actually, the more we move, the better our blood sugar will be too. So you could say that the more we move, the better our hormonal balance will be as well. And the more we exercise or move, the better our response to stress, and the better our cardiac response to stress. Sleeping 8 to 9 hours a night is essential in balancing our nervous system, right? Making sure you're getting enough time to really let your brain recover from the stress of the day. And that will really help boost your problem solving skills and your ability to deal with any stress you find the next day. And then one other thing to touch upon is just connection. This idea of connection with our family, with our friends, it fosters happiness through hormones and neurotransmitter release, right? So when we spend time with family and friends being connected, hopefully more so in person or more on a personal level, it's going to actually release oxytocin, which is like a feel-good hormone. It's going to release dopamine, which is a feel-good hormone. So it's a little bit like a natural, it's the natural opposite to depression, and it's a natural opposite actually to addiction of all things as well. And so, yeah, that concludes my lifestyle recommendation. So I thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to email me. That's really the best way to get in touch with me. I can do some mind body coaching on the side, though, to be honest, it's not a full-time thing for me, just something I'm super interested in and super interested in spreading awareness on. So if you'd like any help or want to know anything more about what you saw in this presentation today, feel free to email me. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. This was wonderful. Such amazing information. And I'm sure everybody who listened in has a better understanding of the impact of simple things as your emotions on your physical well-being, and then vice versa, physical well-being or lack of it on the mental well-being. So
Absolutely.
this is something a lot of people don't know. So the more we can have a conversation around it, the better it is. So thank you so much for taking out the time. Let's open it up for any comments or questions. Susan, do you have any comments or questions? You're on mute.
I think it was a great presentation. I enjoyed it very much.
Thank you.
A lot of really good information.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And Lisa's email ID is on the screen. If you're watching it later on, feel free to email her. She has generously offered to answer any questions. You can reach out to her for any coaching sessions, which she will be fully available in a couple months. Hopefully,
Yes.
she she will keep us informed. Yeah. Thank you, Shobna. I really want to thank everybody who took time on a Sunday. And I know it's vacation week, so a lot of our regular attendees are out, but anybody who's attended today, I really would like to thank you all. Thank you, Lisa, and good luck with all your future endeavors and projects. And we will definitely stay in touch. And we are really happy to have you on our platform so that if people are looking up in our directory, they can find you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Of
Thanks
course.
for coming. Take care.
All right. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody. Rest of the Sunday.
Bye.
Bye-bye.